We'll be talking about immigration today, and my name is John Sullivan.
I'm Naisek Barrios.
I'm Jamari. I'm Chepe Lopez.
Okay, so what is immigration? Immigration is the process of individuals or groups of people moving permanently or temporarily from one country or region to another with the intention of residing or working there. Many people may immigrate for various reasons, such as seeking better job opportunities, reuniting with families, or looking for better educational opportunities, or just seeking a better quality of life. Immigration can occur both legally through the proper channels and documentation and illegally without proper authorization or documentation. Immigration laws and policies vary among countries and can be influenced by factors such as political, economic, and social conditions as well as security concerns. Immigration is a complex issue that can involve debates over national identity, cultural assimilation, and economic impact.
To continue off of our first slide about the overview of immigration, getting into Africa as a continent and how immigration plays out there, we also wanted to kind of give an overview of how immigration looks in this area, and as we were talking about earlier, a lot of it has to do with the economic side of it, where people are usually moving or immigrating due to economic reasons, trying to find a better job or better education, different opportunities like that. And we also wanted to highlight that certainly, population is a big part of it. There is almost 1.5 billion people in Africa, and certainly the population is expected to grow, but the more important figure here is that almost 500 million of those people are living in extreme poverty. And that alone, even more so than the population issues, is people living in extreme poverty is what is driving a lot of this immigration. And also things like climate change is also completely linked to the economic decisions that are being made. And we can go to the next slide. So again, economics and climate change are completely linked when it comes to immigration. Definitely things like decisions that are made on that might impact deforestation or of an area might lead to drought, and other things that lead to climate change, or even just general burning of fossil fuels in factories or certain things. A lot of times it gets put on the poorest people, and that's especially happening in the continent of Africa. And it also impacts the human health and food and water security of the people living there, which is also what is driving a lot of the immigration out of the continent. And a lot of times, people are mostly moving within different areas in the African continent, but some do end up leaving, going towards Europe, which you can see a lot of people trying to take boats through the Mediterranean Sea that are struggling to actually make that trek, which it is very dangerous. So definitely it's important to note the economic factors that lead to immigration in the African continent.
Alright, so now we will speak of North America. And North America was originally a home to the indigenous people when European colonization began in the late 15th century, followed by waves of immigration from Europe in the 17th and 19th centuries. In the late 19th, 20th century, there was massive influx of immigrants from around the world, many facing discrimination. Immigration slowed down during World War I and the Great Depression, but picked up again after World War II. Today, North America remains a destination for immigrants seeking economic opportunities and seeking a better quality of life. Next slide. Alright, South America. South America has a long history of immigration, and in the 19th century, there was a significant immigration from Europe, particularly from Italy and Spain. In the 20th century, there was also immigration from the Middle East. South America has also experienced waves of immigration, particularly in response to the political and economic upheaval, and today the region remains a hub of migration and movement.
Alright guys, so now we're gonna focus on Asia, right? So I find these two quotes on this article. It's climate change is defining change in our time, and stakes are particularly high for Asia Pacific region, right? So many of y'all can ask, for like what this quote means, right? So this quote means that climate change is affecting our time because of the high population in Asia, right? So on Tuesday, we did talk about, how so on Tuesday we did talk about about population and how it affects about climate change, right? The second quote that we have is rising sea levels from global warming are eroding arable land and low elevation coastal zones, posing a certain risk of racial incomes, food security, and community experts. By century, rising waters impact nearly 1 billion people in Asia Pacific region. So this quote has a lot of meanings, right? The first means that climate is affecting a lot of things. It's affecting food security and so on, right? Warming are putting people in danger, and for the sake of the people, also for the health of us, right? So we must keep it in mind that while in Asia Pacific suffers keenly from the effects of climate change, the region is also key source of the problem. The region produces half of the world's carbon dioxide, aka CO2 emissions, and contains 5 of the largest greenhouse gas emitting countries. Okay, so we talk about, right? So now we're going to talk about the overview. In Asia, there's about 4.551 billion people living in Asia. There's 115 million people immigrated to Asia, and also about 17.9 million people are living in India, right? So you can see why people are leaving these countries for having better life, right? And that's why climate change is affecting their homes, right? Because many of us, our parents or ourselves, we are immigrating to another country because we want better life, right? We don't want to be suffering. Thank you.
Alright, as we move away from Asia to Europe, in Europe immigration was a bit different than your traditional migration situations. In Europe, there were 3 periods of migration. The first from the 1950s and 1970s after World War II, the thriving economy in Northwestern Europe caused a shortage of low-paid workers, prompting governments to recruit foreign workers from less developed countries. Migrants came from Algeria, Greece, Italy, Morocco, Portugal, Spain, Indonesia, Turkey, and Yugoslavia. During this period, people moved to find work which helped the economy and sent money back home. The countries where the migrants worked were happy to have them because they needed workers, and it made their economy stronger. Now, as we move on to our second period of migrations in Europe, which was from 1974 to 1980, Europe underwent economic restructuring during the oil crisis from 1973 to 1974, leading to a reduced need for labor. However, migration continued to rise due to changes in Europe migration system, causing an increase in the number of non-European migrants in Europe in the 1970s. Policies to control and reduce migration only increased. Family reunification of migrant workers was considered a fundamental right. can cut this out. But rising unemployment and economic recession fueled hostility towards resident migrants, and the number of asylum applications in Europe rose in 1980s as restrictions on the entry for foreigners in northwestern Europe increased. Migration flows shifted towards southern Europe in 1990s. Now, as we move on to our a third and final period of migration in Europe, which is from 1990 to 1912 or 2012. In 1990, migration patterns in Europe changed with new migration from Eastern Europe and increased. In 1990, migration patterns in Europe changed with new migration from Eastern Europe and an increase in asylum seekers in Western Europe due to the end of the Cold War. Asylum applications rose and fell before increasing again after 2006 and due to conflicts in the Middle Eastern. Stricter borders and control visa regulations made entrance in Europe more challenging and led to an increase in irregular migration. Different policies for mobility and migration exist in Europe, with a focus on attracting highly skilled or educated migrants and international students. The economic crisis of 2008 made it even more challenging for people to move around Europe, especially for countries with significant financial problems.
So Australia, Oceania. So to start off with, in 2020, there was a recorded population around 41.8 million people, and an estimated 9.1 people who were migrants, that is 1 out of 5 people. And in 2021, 2022, immigration to Australia increased from 146,000 a year to 395,000 a year. And 30% of Australia's population lived in poverty in 2020, which is 3,319 people. And here's a quote that says, "Majority of Oceania's islands nation depend on fishing, agriculture, forestry, and tourism. Several of the smaller poor population depend on sustenance farming." And here's a picture showing the region, the Oceania region. Impacts of climate change and economics on Australia and Oceania. So Australia is already facing the cost of climate-driven causes, and is not only physical damage but economic activity, productivity loss, and health costs. According to the Climate Council, the Australian government has failed to recognize the cost of climate change, and similarly the significant economic opportunities of acting swiftly and early on climate change. So the question is whether or not we should work to prevent climate change, but when should we start working against climate change? And as for the Oceania region, it is made up of many islands which are all surrounded by and connected by sea. Being a majority of coastal nations, the people of Oceania rely heavily on seawater as a source for livelihood and economy. These climate-induced changes would not only impact the human livelihood and economy, but also the ecosystem, plants, and animals. So for regions such as Oceania, more for those who live in coastal cities and islands, sinking islands is one of the most threatening effects of climate change for island habitats and economy. So furthermore, loss of infrastructure in coastal land due to erosions are threatening to the livelihood of people living in coastal lands and islands. Saltwater intrusion also causing loss of agricultural land and freshwater. Since majority of the islands nations rely on fishing, the rapid temperature increase has many negative impacts on the marine ecosystem, such as coral bleaching, ocean acidification, and creates an unsurvivable habitat.
So now we really want to end this with solutions. We want to end it with a positive note. And we'll start by saying that a lot of times solutions today are focused on things that don't actually necessarily address the root causes of immigration. A lot of times it's focused on like whether we should have immigration or not. But as Albert Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems with the same ways of thinking that created them. So something that we propose as solutions is that we actually address the root causes, which is the economic system that drives both climate change and immigration. As well, it's important to take this is going to take a lot of organizing of people and educating people around this issue, around a common vision of a cooperative society. And what that means is that everything in society is owned in common, which a lot of times, like, things that drive immigration is that people don't have like access to land or jobs or different things. They're either priced out or different things are privately held, which pushes people out of their homeland. And also, if things are cooperatively owned, then we can use technology to actually address climate change and reverse the effects of it. So yeah, we really want to leave those solutions.